Welcome everyone to a look at our EVGA E1 power board and distribution plate. This video is a continuation of the first video that I did on the EVGA E1, which was basically an overview of the case and my opinions on it. And I said that this is really one of the most creative cases that I have ever seen. I think it's super cool. And we just, had to be a part of this. We had to design something for it. It was screaming out for a power board and distribution plate. So now it's all done. This product has been out there for a little while now. We are shipping it now. Jay has one. He's doing a project with it. We're planning on doing a full build coming up as well. But that's something that I should mention. We spend 90% of our time, or probably more, on product development these days. And so we don't have as much time for builds. So what we would absolutely love to see is, we are working hard on creating the products, creating the designs. So if you guys could send in your build photos, we absolutely love that. We would love to share your builds. So pretty much anyone sends in a build, we'll definitely share it. And we'll just do a build like literally when we have the time, because we have so many projects happening. And actually coming back and looking at this design, because I'm working on like 15 to 20 designs at the same time, I'm kind of trying to remember the design a little bit, because it was it's quite a few months ago now since I worked on this design, so that I can cover it for you. Now I'm going to assume that you are familiar with the case, like you've seen the first video. I'm not going to talk about the case at all. I absolutely love this case. I own this one and will be keeping it forever. It's one of those things that I'm going to keep forever. Let's start with the distribution plate, because it is quite simple. Now, we thought that a distribution plate was extremely important for this case, because it doesn't have much room for a traditional tube pump res combo. Really none. By the time you install 60mm thick radiators, this one is 30, and fans, you can see that you are basically touching in this case it's the power board. So we have replaced the motherboard tray with a power board, but it's the same, very close to the same dimensions as the original motherboard tray. And then you've got a top radiator up here, 60mm, 25mm fans. You're going to be almost touching. And actually in this case, what's a bigger problem is that you end up touching the cords here before you touch the power board / motherboard tray. So yeah, basically in short, very important to have a distribution plate with an integrated pump and reservoir. So we have an integrated D5 on the back, and the reservoir goes up the side here. And I really wanted to do this L-shaped distribution plate because it creates symmetry with the radiators. This space here is filled with the radiators, and then this space here with the distribution plate. So on the left here you have the reservoir, drain at the bottom, fill at the top. Both of those have ports on both sides, so you can choose which side you want to fill and drain it from. So the outlet here, let's start at the outlet. This port is only on the back because it goes to the back port on the front radiator, and then coming from the front port on the front radiator you go across to here. From here to the GPU, GPU to CPU, CPU to top radiator, out of the top radiator into here, and that one's on the back because the CPU is on the front, so you connect to the front port on the radiator. So yeah, not a lot to cover with the distro. So now getting into the power board, and I will make this video a little bit for the uninitiated to the power board, because there is very little information out there about the power board so far, in video form at least. Like, we've done basically nothing to explain how it works, how the cables work, how we're maintaining compatibility. I mean, there's just so many questions that I would love to talk about in videos. Like, we're certainly planning to do it when we get some time. But time is always the problem, because there is so much happening. Okay, so let's start with the core component connections. We have not included anything for the GPU. And we're going to come from here, and I'll show you the back side shortly, for the PCIe / 12VH power. EPS, we have 6 8-pin connections, 2 here, and then 2 here, and then there are also 2 90-degree 8-pin EPS up under the cable there for EVGA motherboards. So all of the EPS are just for different motherboard layouts, like they just obviously moving the EPS all over the place. And that's like one of the biggest challenges is maintaining compatibility, because motherboards move the connectors all over the place. There are no standards for connector locations. 24 pin, you know, it's different every time. And there's a lot of things like this. And in relation to the power board, these are all challenges that we have now overcome. But yeah, there was certainly a few challenges getting these things figured out in the beginning with the power board. But we now have many power boards out there, and you know, all of our cases have power board versions. Okay, so the 24 pin, we just have a 90-degree 24 pin connection there. We have on the front ARGB input, an ARGB output there. There's two more ARGB outputs there. There's actually a total of 11 ARGB outputs and 6 PWM outputs. So the 6 PWM are just for the 3 fans on the front radiator, 3 fans on the top radiator. These connections here are for the touch activated power button, and also for the integrated extra power and reset buttons on the power board. So yeah, the motherboard connections for power, reset and LED connect into the power board just there. Looking from the back, you can see the power board has quite a bit more going on. So we've maintained the original power supply mounting position. We're using the original power supply mounting bracket, support bracket underneath. So we have a couple of ARGB outputs here, 3 more over here, along with 3 PWM outputs, power and reset buttons, and a switch to turn the touch activated power button on and off, which is just here. So you just touch here to turn the system on or off. And then there are 3 more PWM and ARGB outputs over here. So these are obviously positioned for the top radiator, and the ones down here are positioned for the front radiator. We have 3 direct connect SATA 2.5 inch with the inputs over here to the motherboard. So these cables are obviously not managed properly. They could certainly be managed very well. We have a shroud here, and that is because basically every power supply has a different pinout, and the cables, the pinouts are not one-to-one, so they don't sit nicely next to each other like the power board linking cables. They're all crisscrossed, and it's different for every power supply. There's splits, you know, it's a mess. So that's why we have this shroud here, which is, it looks a bit short for this power supply, but with higher end power supplies it's going to cover up most of the cables. And we are including different standoffs so that you can set the height of it. You know, it just depends on power supplies where the connectors are on the back, so you can adjust the height of the shroud to suit that. You also don't have to use the shroud. If you can get the cables looking really nice, you don't really need to use it. But as I've said, with power supply cables being such a mess, you may need it. And that is also why there are 2 categories of cables for power boards. Power board PSU cables, which are not included with the power board, again, because they're all different. So we have to make a custom one, you know, depending on the PSU that the customer is going to use. Now, in some cases, you can still use your stock cables on the input side. Because it's all inside of a PSU shroud, you're not going to see it, but definitely not on this case. There is like the stock case has nothing for cable management. It's all out in the open. It's definitely an enthusiast case for people who want to spend the time or the money to really get the cables nice. And that's where the power board really helps out. So yeah, category 1 is power board PSU cables. Category 2 is power board linking cables. And these are included with every power board. So yeah, you don't have to worry about the linking cables. And with this power board, we've included all of the cables that you could possibly need. Doesn't matter what motherboard you're going to use. EVGA, 90-degree 24 pin, vertical 24 pin. You know, you've got all of the cables here. These are for mounting the SSDs. PWM and ARGB input cables. Cables for the touch activated power button and the extra power and reset buttons, the shroud, and all of the fasteners. So I think we've pretty much covered everything. there's a lighting switch up here. So the power board has integrated ARGB LEDs, and you can switch those on and off if you don't want to have any. So these are 90 degrees around the edges, also facing the front radiator. So keep in mind they're not going to be in your eyes because the fans are going to be, you know, right down here, very close to them. So they're just going to be shining right into the fans, and the fans will kind of diffuse them. And then they're also all the way around the perimeter, also shining into the distribution plate around the edges here.